Dear Mr. Singer, maestro and magician, it's my task and my pleasure, my very great pleasure, to convey to you the heartiest congratulations from the Swedish Academy and to ask you to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature 1978 from the hands of His Majesty the King.
The magician of Lublin, the wise man of Krochmalna Street in Warsaw, the teller of remarkable stories that happened to ordinary people. He was born in 1904 in the village of Leonci. He lived in Poland till 1935, for 20 of those years in Warsaw. Then he lived in America. These are his heroes and his landscapes. Polish Jews, little Polish Jewish towns, the poorest streets of Jewish Warsaw, the Polish land that was Yiddish land. His family was linked to Poland for 600 years.
His Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, people are asking me often, why do you write in a dying language? And I want to explain it in a few words. Firstly, I like to write ghost stories, and nothing fits a ghost better than a dying language. The deader the language, the more alive is the ghost. Ghosts love Yiddish, they all speak it. Secondly, I believe in resurrection. I'm sure that the Messiah will soon come and millions of Yiddish-speaking corpses will rise from their graves one day. And their first question will be, is there any new Yiddish book to read?
Papa, does God have a beard?
Don't say such things. Let me study.
Mama, does a horse have a soul?
Don't ask so many questions all at once. Let me read.
A small red-headed boy, asking difficult questions since he was 3. A genius and a strange one, never fitting in, amorous from his early years, if we are to believe what his books tell us. But no other records survive. They shared the fate of the Polish Jews. It is the beginning of the century. In Warsaw, people travel in horse-drawn streetcars and hackney cabs. Above the shops hang signs in Russian. You pay in rubles. But new hopes are born. World War I brings independence to Poland. Devout Hasidim in Jewish shtetls try to turn back time, but already their sons and even their daughters are secretly reading secular books and newspapers. They're streaming towards Warsaw. In the Jewish streets, you can't find an empty corner to sit down in. Every third inhabitant of the capital is Jewish. A Jewish society is taking shape. A Poland in the throes of reconstruction will have to come to terms with this situation, a situation no one yet understands, not in Europe, not in America.
Jeszcze w 1919 roku, kiedy premier Paderewski na wiosnę dyskutował z Lloyd George'em i już nie pamiętam, chyba był prezydent Wilson ze Stanów Zjednoczonych na temat przyszłego traktatu narodowościowego, który podpisać miała Polska. To wówczas, kiedy Paderewski mówił o szkołach w języku jidysz, to Lloyd George zareagował, że traktat narodowościowy ma zapewnić prawa dla mniejszości, ale nie ma tworzyć sztucznych mniejszości. Dla niego Żydzi byli tylko i wyłącznie wspólnotą wyznaniową, natomiast nie traktował ich w sensie narodowym. Paderewski, z Polski pochodzący przecież, już widział, że sytuacja wygląda inaczej. że Żydzi są w warunkach Europy Środkowej narodem.
Filozofia jidyszyzmu powstała na takim, na podstawie myśli, że istnieje przecież cały naród, co trzeba nazwać w wschodniej Europie żydowski naród, czyli był wśród tych wszystkich prądów narodowych, czeskich, polskich, ukraińskich i tak dalej, Żydzi też, którzy szukali jakiś sposób być nowoczesnym i również zostać w jakiś sposób Żydem, że Żydzi konstatują naród we wschodniej Europie i ich język narodowy jest jidysz. I jeśli tak, to powstaje taki cały tak zwany Jidyszland. I gdzie jest ta kraina jidysz? To jest w Polsce, ale również w Ameryce. Gdziekolwiek ludzie rozmawiają i gdziekolwiek ten język jidysz żyje. I stwarza się cała literatura około tego.
A nation has less to do with a flag or an army or a passport than a shared history, a sense of common fate. If you think of Poland during the partition, legally there was no Poland, and legally there were no Poles. You were a Russian, you were a Prussian, you were a Habsburg, whatever, Austrian, but you really were a Pole, because in your heart you felt as if you were a Pole. You loved Polish, you were a member of the Polish nation, even when there was no government to represent you. And that's the way Jews always felt, including Jews in Poland.
Among the immigrants from the shtetl was a pious Hasidic family with 4 children, 3 of whom will become writers in the future and will write the last chapter of Yiddish culture. One of them, a controversial young man with a vivid imagination and a confused personal life, will one day win the Nobel Prize because, gifted with an extraordinary power of observation and a phenomenal memory, he has preserved for us that whole world with all its aspirations, complications, and everyday life.
I was barely over 5 years old when my parents, my father, Pinchas Menahem Singer, and my mother, Bathsheba, moved to Krochmalna Street in Warsaw. But unbelievable as this may sound, I already carried the memories of 2 former homes with me. The village of Leoncin, where I was born, and where my father served as a rabbi, and the little town of Radzymin, where my father had become the head of a yeshiva. Both of these places were near the Vistula, the largest river in Poland. I was about 3 years and 5 months old when we moved to Radzymin. But I remember Leoncin and episodes I lived through there until today. When I told this to my mother in later years, she refused to believe me. She questioned me about details, and I convinced her that I was telling the truth. I described each house, each store, and many of the Jewish families who lived there. I also remembered a number of Gentiles, both Poles and Germans, who had their own community in the suburbs. I could recall a long walk to the Vistula, taken with my sister Hindałe and 2 other girls, as well as a circumcision party of my younger brother Moshe. He was 3 years younger than me.
What a memory. Let no evil eye befall you.
Singer was raised in a home in which his parents were too preoccupied and themselves too unhappy to really spend much time raising him. His father was a gentle, sweet character who was a terrible breadwinner. He used to go off on trips and leave the family alone. His mother was a brilliant woman, very intelligent, and she was depressed and withdrawn. He had a brother and sister, older brother and sister, who were very influential, and I think these people, even more than his parents, influenced who he became. So his brother, Israel Joshua Singer, who was also a writer, 10 years older, was his role model. He was always ahead of him in every endeavor. And it was his brother who brought him to the United States, and it was his brother who was the successful writer. Now, he had an older sister, and she was very important because she was 13 years older. She was the only person who really gave him warmth and affection. But she was also an epileptic and had psychological difficulties of her own. She was very highly dramatic. You could even say hysterical. Her seizures were of the sort that you wouldn't necessarily know she was having them, and you couldn't tell by looking at her. And afterwards, she couldn't remember. So his whole fascination with demons, I think, had something to do with the fact that she would have these seizures and then think that she had been maybe possessed by a demon because she couldn't remember what she had done.
Gott leuben soll die Zitre im Spielen seinen Nissim. Anissim läubt mit Lieder und Enzim. Soll die